Dear fellow citizens, the outbreak of COVID 19 has created an unprecedented situation around the world. Humankind is no stranger to calamitous outbreaks of diseases. However, this is the first viral outbreak of this nature and scale in our lifetime. Today, our thoughts are with all those battling the virus, with the families of all those victims around the world, and also with all the doctors and paramedics and the health officials and all the others who have put their lives at risk for the rest of us. Given our country's population density and diverse economical conditions, we have gathered here today to see various steps that Government of India have taken to fight COVID and to further discuss various steps to bring India back on the track of achieving substantial economic stability. We have with us Honorable Prime Minister Modi, Honorable Finance Minister, the RBI Governor, the CEO of Niti Aayog and Chief Economic Advisor of India, and finally the Director General of NSO, the National Statistical Office. I hereby request the Honorable Prime Minister to address and mark the start of today's meet.
Good evening, honorable attendees. It is indeed my honor and privilege to welcome you all to the yearly meeting on the major macroeconomic events of the financial year 2021. Today, as the result of the valiant efforts of our COVID warriors, we are beginning to see the light at the end of the tunnel. We must thank those who have worked tirelessly to save the lives of our people. Now, it is our turn to tackle the issues of livelihood of our people. During the pandemic, we were required to make sure that people don't starve, people have some money in their pockets, and we didn't want cascades of default happening through our financial systems. And we certainly provided support for that. We have created the world's largest food program with 800 million people being given free food. We used the Jan Dhan system to provide support in the form of direct benefit transfer. The Air India privatization has indeed been a seminal moment, and we have removed the euphemism disinvestment and used the word privatization. The asset monetization pipeline now plans to monetize the underutilized assets in a more structured way. We also, at the same time, have willingness to create new public sector enterprises with necessary, one being the DFI, Development and Finance Institution. The Indian economy is recovering quite strongly. All the high frequency data, whether it be exports and other indicators, have shown a strong V shaped recovery. I think the most neutral people will agree that the Indian economy survived the shock of pandemic rather well, and we will probably do a double digit growth next year. We also face a trade off with collecting taxes and inflationary pressure due to various public welfare schemes, vaccination programs being one of them. We have created a large kitty of revenue, so our fiscal numbers are exceptionally good. And now we have the resources to ramp it up, especially on capital expenditure on infrastructure. We also believe the critical thing for our job growth is economic growth. Equally important is to remember that it is not just the reinflation of the pre-COVID world. The new world will have its own technology, its supply chain, and its industries, and we need to support them. And we are certainly doing so with the PLI scheme, Production Linked Incentive Scheme. Now, I would like other honorable members to share their informed views and present about the present scenario. Can we first have a look at the data of how we fared with the rising cases in the country and how we managed our various sectors?
India crossed its peak of the number of active cases in mid-September at about 93,000 active cases. The northern region in India experienced the second wave of infections during the festive months of October and November. The eastern states had the lowest number of active cases, numbered at 342 cases per lakh population as of 31st December 2020. Maharashtra was the worst affected state out of all the states, having the highest death counts. It was imperative for India to rapidly scale up its testing and contact tracing capacity in order to respond to the continuously rising crisis. India increased its testing capacity by rapidly testing up testing facility from just one at NIV Pune to more than 2,300 facility nationwide, which was an exceptional achievement for the Indian medical system. Keeping the focus on test, track, and treat, India has tested nearly 18.5 crore cumulative COVID-19 samples with cumulative test positivity rate at 5.6% as of 31st December 2020.
So now let's look at some specific sectors. Let's start with the health sector. So as Mr. Shah talked about the patients and the COVID patients and the impact COVID-19 caused in their lives, I would like to drag your attention to the collateral damage it caused on the non-COVID health sector. So what I want to show is in normal times, 90% of people who had an ailment used to seek outside medical advice, that is insurance or outside medical help. But this data was drastically low during lockdown and it fell to 40%. Now this is a huge loss as this completely baffles the insurance industry and it creates a major hole in the economy. Now another stat is that the PMJ policy, which was made for facilitating hospitalization and medical facilities amongst the poor people, that declined by 64% during the early lockdown phases. Now, this is a huge number. And during the 10-week lockdown, and it reduced by further 51%. Now, so what this shows is that the facilities that were specifically introduced to avail for the poor people are not being fully utilized during this COVID time. This included 25% for deliveries and also 64% for the cancer care patients. Now, dragging your attention to a specific case of tuberculosis. Now, the tuberculosis notification that was received by the government was 84% lower in the month of April than it was in the previous year. Now, this shows that the tuberculosis patients have been highly neglected. So this can cause a huge problem in the next 5 years when these diseases that were unnotified as of now will gain a serious consequence. So now, what can we do to ensure that this does not happen? So here are some reforms that I'd like to suggest. We can strengthen the core public health functions which focus on the non-COVID healthcare process. We should introduce some institutional reforms and innovations in the vertical disease programs like tuberculosis and HIV. And we should also increase the private sector engagement at a scale for tuberculosis diagnosis and treatment so that the cases do not go unnotified. There should be performance-based initiatives to states and districts through the disease performance index so that they are motivated to perform better in the non-COVID cases, and the public health cadres to execute core public health functions at national and state district levels should also be introduced. Now, I would like to drag your attention to the statistics which shows that not every state in the country perform equally when it comes to rapid testing and actions to the COVID patients. So, what can be done to ensure that in such a situation when it further arises, same is not the situation? So, uh, I'd like to propose some response that can be measured for this. So, one is we can strengthen the surveillance at district level capacity to identify and respond to the future epidemics that may arise. We can roll out targeted investment schemes and enhance integrated public health laboratory services so that the research and the state capacities are not weak. We can strengthen national and state institutions to effectively prepare for the pandemics. And we can also strengthen the interagency coordination so that the state level and national level coordination is perfect and a process can be rapidly carried out. Moving forward to the next sector of education. Now, as we know that education sector took a very major hit during the COVID-19. Now, education is not only one of the most important sector as it creates the future of the nation, but is also a source of employment for a huge mass of population. And thus, it is a very important sector for the growth of the economy. Now, since there were many alternatives for the mediums of teaching and learning which were hampered during the COVID, so that is the lesser evil here. The bigger problem is that the fees and the educational institutions caused in the households that have had to endure. So this is not a small percentage for middle class households, and thus it has pierced through some of the savings also. Now, this is a very huge problem as post pandemic they won't have the resources that are needed for the proper continuation of this education. So a way to relieve the fee stress and to facilitate proper flow as well as continuum for this education is a very important aspect of the policies that are needed to roll out in the future so as to ensure the smooth education for at least some time post the pandemic or in the later stages, because that is going to be a very important factor. So to propose some actions that can be taken in this aspect is not only the funding, but this is a very good opportunity as if the schools are going to be revamped. So these are some other actions that can be proposed. So the first is to leverage public schools. As we know that public schools can be put at the center of the education system, and then they can play an essential role in equalizing opportunity across all the dimensions of the society. We can emphasize on the instructional core, that is the heart of the teaching and learning process. We can harness the education technology so that the teaching and the learning can be made in a better way, and then it can be taken at a new level. We can forge stronger and more trusting relationship between parents and teachers to inculcate new teaching methods and modern approaches, and can embrace the principles of improvement science. And this is an iterative process, right? This is an iterative approach where we can scale new approaches that can help power up school over time. Like now, I would like to bring your attention to one of the most controversial sector, I'd like to say, that is the agricultural sector. It is the most important sector when it comes to facilitating all other sectors because it is the food source of India. Now there has been a noticeable reduction in the sale of agricultural produce in the year of 21 as is clearly visible in the stat. Now, this has led to a decrease in household income of farmers and thus has ultimately affected also the production of new produce.
Thank you, Mr. Patel. Uh, Honorable Prime Minister and my fellow attendings, a very good morning. Now, I would like to bring your notice towards the sectoral impact of COVID-19 in India. The spread and intensity of COVID-19 induced twin economic shock that can be broadly captured through impact on output or the gross value added and employment. In terms of GVA shock, non-essential activities are likely to endure a combined shock directly proportional to their respective GVA contribution, given that they could not operate during lockdown. Essential activities are likely to undergo a dampened shock, primarily arising from the indirect impact of restricted activities in non-essential sectors. In terms of employment shock, contact sensitive sectors like trade, hotels, transport, tourism, etc., are likely to undergo a shock proportional to the respective employment share, with informal workers likely to bear the larger brunt, which can be seen through this following figure. The construct. The impact of the pandemic and associated health measures has been unique as it has affected every sector of the economy. Agriculture was largely insulated from the lockdown in India as timely and proactive exemptions from COVID-induced lockdowns to the sector facilitated uninterrupted harvesting of rabi crops and sowing of kharif crops. However, supply chain disruptions impacted the flow of agricultural goods, leading to high food inflation and adverse initial impact on some major agricultural exports. The manufacturing sector was hit hard in the first quarter, but has since picked up, though mining still remains impacted. The construction and services sector were hit the hardest due to the pandemic-induced requirements of social distancing. As it is visible from the graph, the manufacturing sector was hit hard in the first quarter but has since picked up through mining, though mining still remains impacted.
Can you explain how adversely our MSME sector, providing employment to a major chunk of population, has been affected?
Honorable Sir, according to the annual report of Department of MSMEs, there are over 6.34 crores of MSMEs in the country, out of which more than half of them are based in rural India. So, according to this data, we can say that around 99.5% of all the MSMEs fall in the micro category, and all the categories in total employ roughly about 16 crore people. So, for the MSME sector, we have several problems that came up during the year. So, as of all these categories, the first category is that the MSMEs are not registered. The MSMEs are very small to get registered and to get qualified for GSTs. Thus, this does minimize their cost as they get exemption from the taxes, but it also constrains the government in times of crisis to help them. The second most important reason is the lack of financing, as the major source of funding for all the MSMEs comes from informal sources, and thus the government has a very limited impact in terms of pushing liquidity towards these MSMEs. Even the banks are reluctant to give out loans due to bad instances of bad loans. The last and very crucial point here is the delay of payment to these micro businesses. This could even be from the government as well as from the buyers, or maybe in terms of GST refunds. This crisis affected the MSMEs quite severely as they were already running low on funding and human resources, and now have to, due to the lockdown, they do not have sufficient cash accompanied by the limited labor availability.
Should the government simply resort to printing more money to alleviate economic suffering?
Honorable Prime Minister Sir, the monetary policy and liquidity operations during 2020-21 were geared towards mitigating the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. The Monetary Policy Committee cut the policy repo rate by 115 basis points during March-May 2020 on top of a cumulative reduction of 135 basis points during Feb 19 to Feb 20. Backed by conventional and unconventional liquidity measures, these actions bolstered financial market sentiments while ensuring orderly market conditions. Interest rates and bond yields declined across market segments and spreads narrowed, with a distinct improvement in monetary transmission. One of the most frequently asked and important question to discuss therefore is, should we print more money during this distress time? Let's have a look at both sides of the argument. So, in favor of printing money, household income in India has drastically decreased due to the COVID-19 lockdown. There was a significant decrease in the level of income, with households reporting a fall in income from about 9% in late Feb to a whopping 45.7% in mid April. Less disposable income means consumers spend less on goods, impacting the aggregate demand and affecting normal production levels. Printing more money would help the government to have the necessary funds to spend on stimulus packages to MSMEs and small businesses, preventing insolvency issues. Also, printing more money would introduce more liquidity in the economy, allowing it to function smoothly in an environment of crisis. Now, one of the crucial argument against printing more money is that the fiscal deficit is already projected to shoot above 15% of the country's GDP, with the permitted limit at 6%. Thus, printing more money at this stage could lead the fiscal deficit to rocket, and if left unchecked or inappropriately utilized, could lead to uncontrolled inflation levels, impacting the economically weaker section of the society, thus eventually doing more harm to the poor than helping them.
How has the COVID pandemic impacted the supply and demand of bank loans in our economy?
As the lockdown restricted movement of people, the transportation industry suffered a major setback, which led to fewer people purchasing these goods and opting to reserve the money for necessities and emergencies. Thus, the housing loans and personal vehicle loans declined sharply, and the retail loans continued to plummet. In the case of businesses, the MSMEs and small businesses struggled to keep their businesses alive due to the decreased consumer industrial demands, and they required loan with minimal risk to keep their essential activities afloat and avoid cutting off jobs. So, regarding the supply of loans, the RBI cut down the repo rate to 4.4% and reverse repo rate to 3.75% and continued to revise it thereon to ensure banks can easily offer loans to the distressed small businesses and individuals. The RBI has even allowed a provision for moratorium on loan payments to prevent small businesses from going out of business. It also started targeted long term repo operations. Essentially, this facility allowed banks to borrow money from the RBI at the repo rate, which is far lower than the prevailing interest market rate. The hope was that banks would use cheaper loans to extend cheaper credit to businesses, and this will help business survive this tumultuous period and mandated that 50% of this amount borrowed by the banks must go to small and mid-sized non-banking financial companies and microfinance institutions. On the other hand, the RBI is incentivizing banks to borrow from it at low rates and lend it forward to businesses. Yet, on the other, it is disincentivizing them from coming back and parking these funds with the RBI. Again, the benefits of this move are twofold. One, it provides more liquidity, but more importantly, it also provides it targeted to those institutions that are most hit by the economic slowdown and, as such, most in need of funds to survive themselves and boost economic activity at the bottom of the pyramid. It has been decided that in respect of all the accounts for which lending institutions decide to grant moratorium or deferment, and which were standard as on March 1, 2020, the 90-day NPA norm shall exclude the moratorium period. There would be an asset classification standstill for all such accounts from March 1, 2020 to March 31, 2020. For the banks are as such risk averse and they are parking more money with the RBI because they are reluctant to offer loans due to high default probability of the businesses.
What major steps have we taken in terms of our fiscal policy, and what long term impacts are we expecting from our stimulus package that we have given?
Honorable Prime Minister, we, with the help of RBI, took multifaceted measures to ensure financial stability and offer essential regulatory assistance to alleviate the pandemic's demand and supply constraints. We announced Atmanirbhar package, which includes one of the world's largest food grain distribution programs, direct cash transfers to 42 crore individuals, more than 20 crore women Jan Dhan accounts, cash assistance to buildings and construction workers, 30,000 crore additional emergency working capital funding for farmers through NABARD, additional pension payments, and provision for free gas cylinders and additional allocations under MG Narega scheme. Furthermore, the Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana Abhiyan (GKRA) was inaugurated on June 20th, 2020 in 116 districts across 6 states for a duration of 125 days in order to increase job and livelihood possibilities for migrant workers, employees who had returned to their communities, and people in rural regions who had been similarly affected due to the pandemic of COVID-19. Next slide. We established an emergency credit line guarantee scheme, ECLGS 1.0, to assist companies in providing much needed relief to strained sectors and for maintaining jobs and satisfying liabilities, as well as government guarantees for credit and postponement of financial deadlines, etc. The scheme was also updated to version 2.0, ECLGS 2.0, established to provide the appropriate credit guarantee for banks and NBFC loans to identify the troubled sectors. Next slide. Under Atmanirbhar Package 2, we announced the following plans and reliefs to boost the capital expenditure for the extension of LTC voucher scheme and also the introduction of festival advance. And under Atmanirbhar Package 3, we announced plans to boost the Atmanirbhar manufacturing by giving production-linked incentives. We also announced plans to give boost for the rural employment. We approved the R&D grant for COVID Suraksha for the Indian vaccine development. And also the introduction of Atmanirbhar Bharat Rozgar Yojana and the funds for improvement of industrial infrastructure, industrial incentives, and domestic defense equipment, and also give agriculture by giving fertilizer subsidy. And to ameliorate the corporate stress, we suspended the initiation of fresh insolvencies proceedings under Section 7, 9, and 10 of Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code 2016 for defaults arising on or after 25th March 2020 till 25th March 2021. Next slide.
Can you tell what are the various macroeconomic indicators telling us about the state of our economy?
Honorable Prime Minister, to judge the overall health of an economy, we need some useful indicators. Here we discuss some key indicators like GDP, prices, external sector, money and credit, and fiscal indicators, which are piece of economic data, usually of macroeconomic scale, that is used by analysts to interpret current or future possibilities. Now, to start with GDP. GDP at current price or nominal GDP is the GDP unadjusted for the effects of inflation. GDP at constant price or real GDP is the GDP adjusted for the effects of inflation. So here we can see that both GDP at constant prices and GDP at current prices decreased for the year 2021. Now let's see what are the major reasons for the fall in GDP. So due to the fall in consumer spending and investment in nominal GDP, the reason that it would be one reason. Exports during April-March 2020-21, however, dipped by 7.4% compared to 2019 previous year. Also, imports during the 2020-2021 year contracted by 18% compared to during the previous year, followed by the rise in inflation rate from 3.72% to 6.62% from the previous year. The deflator increases, subsequently decreasing the real GDP. Now, coming to the growth rate. So, as the ripples of demonetization and a poorly designed and hastily implemented GST spread through an economy that was already struggling with massive bad loans in the banking system, the growth rate steadily fell from over 8% in financial year 2017 to about 4% in financial year 2020, just before COVID-19 hit the country. An analysis of the key variables suggests the fundamental of the Indian economy were already quite weak, even in January last year, well before the pandemic. For example, if one looks at the recent past, as we can see in the chart, India's GDP growth pattern resembled in an inverted V even before COVID-19 hit the economy.
For the price indicator, India uses changes in the CPI to measure its rates of inflation. Inflation, which is mainly driven by the food prices, remained above 6% for much of the year, and the given supply and the disruptions. The softening of the CPI curve of the inflation recently reflects the easing of supply side constraints that affected the food inflation. For the sector, the external sector provided an effective cushion to the India during these uncertain times. Amid the domestic and global demand and the supply disruptions, India's merchandise export and imports fell by over 12.4% in the first half of 2021, with the contraction being more severe for imports at 47.6%. We also suspect that the recent increase reflects higher cash withdrawals by all the depositors to meet their needs during the lockdown period until the normalcy returns. Due to the demand pull inflation or the situation where too much money is chasing few goods, as there is a scarcity of goods, whether it would be in healthcare or in the agricultural sectors, or anymore. So this caused a rise in the general price levels, eventually resulting into a growth in the money supply. For the fiscal indicators, India recorded a fiscal deficit of over 9.3% of the total GDP in the year 2020-2021, and which was 0.2% lower than the revised estimate of 9.5% of the GDP, according to the Controller General of Accounts. Due to this downward trend in the aggregate demand during the pandemic, the gross fiscal deficit also saw a decrease from 4.6% to 3.5% of the total GDP. Generally, higher fiscal deficits are desired to boost the aggregate demand. The primary deficit was 0.4% of the total GDP. That is, it is very close to zero as of the year 2021, which indicates that the interest commitments on all the earlier loans have forced the government to borrow money from various sources.
I would like to propose the vote of thanks to all the attendees for their insightful statistics and analysis, and I'm sure will influence our policy making to propel us towards a more prospering economy.